listening to the Christian Post Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 18th. Televangelist Brian Carn Jr., the self-styled prophet who leads Kingdom City Church, is behind bars, despite publicly insisting he'd never see the inside of a cell. Prison records show the 37-year-old began a 9-month sentence Friday at the Federal Correctional Institution in Bentonville, South Carolina, after pleading guilty in January to obstructing IRS efforts to collect more than $600,000 in unpaid taxes. Prosecutors say Carn earned over $1.4 million in 2015, then amended his return to erase nearly $1.3 million in income and concealed assets, costing the Treasury between $550,000 and $1.5 million. At a July service, Carn declared, "I'll never spend a day in jail. I ain't scared." On Sunday, Associate Pastor J.R. Butler called him the world's prophet and the devil's nightmare, urging members to keep giving. Kansas Senate candidate Adam Hamilton's campaign is pushing back after a 2022 sermon clip resurfaced online in which the United Methodist pastor suggested non-Christians may reach heaven. Hamilton, lead pastor of the Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, won the August 4th Democratic primary and will challenge Republican Senator Roger Marshall. In the clip circulated by Breitbart News, Hamilton said of other faiths, quote, "When they get to heaven, they're going to see Jesus," adding, "I don't fear that those folks will spend eternity in hell." His campaign told the Christian Post that Hamilton was not speaking of Universalism, but rather inclusivism, noting inclusivists, quote, "are not saying that all religions are equally valid paths." Texas Senator Ted Cruz called the sermon heretical, citing John 14:6. The Babylon Bee has filed a federal lawsuit against New Mexico officials over a state law requiring warning labels on AI-generated political satire. The suit, filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of New Mexico, challenges House Bill 182, which bans AI-created satire of political candidates or issues without a state-mandated disclaimer, applies year-round, and carries fines up to $20,000. The complaint argues the law lets officials punish core political speech for no reason other than that they disapprove it. Bee CEO Seth Dillon said, quote, "We're used to getting pulled over by the joke police, but comedy isn't a crime." Alliance Defending Freedom is representing the Bee. Bill's sponsor, Representative Charlotte Little, countered that the law simply requires a disclosure and doesn't ban AI. The Bee previously won similar challenges in California and Hawaii. Imagine receiving the most important message in the world but never fully understanding it. Many individuals, families, and communities still don't have access to the full Bible in a language and format they clearly understand. Bible translation helps people learn who God is, encounter Jesus, and grow in their faith. And this summer, you can be a part of what God is doing through Bible translation around the world. Your gift to Wycliffe Bible translators can help support work in 189 languages, with the potential to impact nearly 441 million people who are still waiting to understand God's Word. Make an impact today at Wycliffe. That's wycliffe.org/summer. You'll also find the link in the show notes. Be part of making God's Word available to all people everywhere. Our thanks to Wycliffe for sponsoring this episode. Christian relief organizations are mobilizing in western Colombia after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake, the country's strongest in a decade, killed hundreds and left thousands homeless. Samaritan's Purse airlifted 100,000 pounds of supplies aboard a Boeing 767 from Greensboro, North Carolina, including more than 3,000 hygiene kits, 3,000 solar lights, and 1,200 rolls of emergency tarp. Disaster response manager Nick Beckert says a Colombian national team is coordinating with churches, having already heard from over 100 pastors, aiming to meet physical needs while connecting with the spiritual trauma these people are going through. President Franklin Graham urged prayer, noting people are sleeping on the streets in fear because of the strong aftershocks. The group Onto is also responding. CEO Al Goff estimates more than 50,000 buildings damaged, saying, quote, "Getting people praying for them is job one." Chinese authorities in Wenzhou, the coastal city long known as China's Jerusalem, have detained a prominent house church pastor and 6 others, all of whom have since disappeared. According to Christian Solidarity Worldwide and the Texas-based watchdog China Aid, Shanghai police carried out the raid around 7:30 a.m. on August 5th, seizing Pastor David Tang, a church financial administrator, and 5 ministry workers from Shanghai. Tang leads Wenzhou's purpose-driven church, also called Baigon Church, which never registered with the state-run Three Self-Patriotic Movement and was ordered closed. CSW President Mervyn Thomas called it an incommunicado detention, urging Beijing to reveal their whereabouts and grant access to lawyers and family. China Aid's Bob Fu said authorities increasingly rely on intimidation, enforced disappearances, and the misuse of criminal law, favoring fraud and financial charges over religious ones. An Arizona judge has sentenced 52-year-old Adam Schiff to life in prison for the crucifixion-style killing of Pastor Bill Shoneman, the 76-year-old leader known to his New River congregation as Pastor Bill. Shoneman was found dead and bloodied in his bed in April 2025, his arms outstretched and hands pinned to a wall. Schiff, who represented himself, also received a 35-year term and 2 25-year terms for attempted murder, all running consecutively under a June plea deal that took the death penalty off the table. He confessed to placing thorns around the pastor's head and said 13 more Christian leaders were on his list, one saying he wanted to execute every single priest and burn every church to the ground. At sentencing, Schiff asked the family's forgiveness, saying the pastor had done nothing to him personally. A new film is putting one of the Cold War's most consequential standoffs back in the spotlight and highlighting the role faith played in it. The Brink of War stars Jeff Daniels as President Ronald Reagan and Jared Harris as Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, dramatizing the high-stakes negotiations between the two superpower leaders. According to the Christian Post, the film reveals how faith, religious freedom, and the persecution of believers inside the Soviet Union shaped Reagan's approach to the talks, pressing Gorbachev not only on nuclear arms but on the right of Soviet citizens to worship freely. Daniels and Harris, both acclaimed for their portrayals of real-life figures, bring the tense diplomatic showdown to life. The project underscores a chapter of Cold War history often overshadowed by missile counts and summit theatrics. You can learn more about this story and everything you heard today by clicking the links in the podcast show notes below. Thank you for listening to the Christian Post Daily Podcast. We encourage you to follow the show in your podcast player of choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or third-party podcast players like Overcast and Pocket Casts. You can also download the Edifi app for free and listen to all the podcasts on the Edifi network by clicking the link in today's podcast show notes. We would also appreciate a 5-star rating in Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help us reach a wider audience with the Christian Post Daily Podcast. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter and get the top headlines delivered to your inbox by clicking that link in the show notes as well. Thank you again for listening to the Christian Post Daily Podcast.